And it's wonderful to be a friend of Father Richard and Lydia Lopez. Father Richard is a very, very courageous individual. He has always been such a visionary, uh, taking care of homeless children in Los Angeles, many of them undocumented, helping them get to school, helping them find housing, helping them find jobs, and going into the desert. He was one of the first persons that took water into the desert for the people that are trying to cross the desert, making sure that undocumented people had a place to not only sleep, but also had a place to eat, feeding hundreds of homeless people every single day. So please give an applause for Father Richard Estrada, please. And thank you all for having this gathering today. We are living in such difficult times, and I know that you're here today to get spiritual guidance, which is something that we need very much, but also spiritual activism. And I've heard that they go together, okay? that you cannot have one without the other. And this is, of course, what we need to do in this day, that we have to fortify ourselves, and we have to take on the issues that are challenging our society, our country, and actually our world. And I do believe that we have to start with basics and start thinking about what can we as institutions, what can we as individuals do to erase some of the wrongs that are happening right now. As we know, just a couple of days ago, we had another school shooting where a young troubled person, felt that somehow he had to take a gun to kill some of his fellow students. And when we think about this, I was a former school teacher. And as a school teacher, I can tell you that even in elementary, in the first grades and the third grades, that you can spot a child that is troubled and a child that needs help. But somehow we don't have, our educational system has not been fortified enough so that we can take care of those children. So one of the things I'm just going to begin with is to talk about our educational system. And we know that teachers are not earning enough money, that the class sizes are too large, that we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough counselors, we don't have enough social workers in our school system. And so we can start beginning with that. Let's, revamp our educational system to make sure that they have the resources enough to do the job that they need to do. And today we're going to ask you to help us, because actually we have petitions out in front. So as you leave the audience here today, as you leave the gathering here today, you can go out there and help us sign a petition that will actually bring in $12 billion into California's educational system. And how are we going to do that? Really simply, we're going to ask the large corporate property owners to pay their fair share of property taxes, okay? Easy. But we do have to get the signatures to be able to put that on the ballot for here in California's election of November of 2020. So that is one easy way. By the way, it will not affect homeowners whose property taxes have been rising every year anyway. It will not affect small business owners either. Anyone that makes $3 million or less in their business will not be affected by this. So it's only for the big guys, okay? The big corporations that they need to step up and pay their fair share. And it's called Schools and Communities First, okay? That is the name of the ballot initiative, Schools and Communities First. The other thing that we have to do in our educational system is we have to really dig down and start teaching our children, starting with pre-K and kindergarten, okay, that we are one human race. So somehow we have to get rid of the racism that is affecting our society. And one simple way to do this, of course, is to teach children the true history of the United States of America, the Howard Zinn history of the United States of America. starting with telling them, who built the White House of the United States? Who built the Congress of the United States? We all know it was African slaves. But that is not in our school books. Talk about all of the immigrants that came into the United States from Mexico, from the Philippines, from India, from China, from Japan. All of these immigrants of color that came here and built the infrastructure of our country. And this is so important so that our children of color will have the dignity that they deserve to know what their people did to build this country. So they should never feel like outsiders. And then our Anglo children will not be fed with that poison of white supremacy and white privilege, okay? And so we cannot, as a nation, keep somehow developing individuals that think that they have to kill someone because they're a different color of skin, or Mexicans like they did in El Paso, Texas, or kill people because they're African Americans. This is what happened in Dayton, Ohio, and in Alabama. Or kill people because they are Muslims, because they're Arabs, or kill people because they're Jews. And in other countries, of course, because they're Christians. Somehow we have to stop that. We have to end that. And one really simple way of doing this is just, again, as I said before, to teach everybody, our children, that we are one human race. We are one human race. We have a lot of different ethnic groups. We have a lot of different cultures. We have a lot of different nationalities, but only one human race. And our human race is, of course, Homo sapiens sapien. This is our scientific name of our human race. And so, we can say to all of those people in the KKK, the white nationalists, oh, I forgot one little point. Where did our human race begin? Africa. This is where our human race began. It began in Africa, and as our people traveled across the planet, of course, they went to Asia, came down through the Bering Strait to the Americas. People lost some of their color. They got a little bit lighter. And then one of our tribes went to Europe, where it's really cold, and they really lost their color, okay? And now you have to go to the tanning salon or to the beach to get your color back. So we can say to the KKK and to the white nationalists, get over it, you're Africans, okay? Just get over it. And we know that the only way that our human race survived on this planet, because we were lunch for the other animals, well, the only way that we survived is that we had to stay together, we had to protect each other, we had to protect each other. And this is why we, as a human race, were able to take over the planet, so to speak. So, but we're all related. So I would like to ask everybody, take the hand of the person next to you. Take the hand of the person next to you. Turn to them and say, hello, relative.
Hello what? Hello, relative, yeah. Hello, relative. That's good, that's good stuff.
And somehow we have got to start spreading this message to everybody. I myself had my own DNA done. And actually, I didn't do it. It was some television station, and they came and they swabbed my cheek, and they asked me, what do you think you are in terms of your ethnic background? I said, well, on my mother's side, I know I'm probably 60% European. On my father's side, probably 40% indigenous. Well, when my DNA came back, guess what? I was 65% European and 35% indigenous. And then I said, well, did my Africanness show up? And it did. It was 0.003. But then they showed me the paper. I said, guess what? You're 0.005 Neanderthal. Little did I know that my DNA went all the way back to the United Kingdom. I never knew that. All the way back to the United Kingdom. So that's where the Neanderthal came in, okay? That's where that came in. And I think some of you may remember that our president was saying something about building a wall on the Colorado border. Well, I think he was looking at the map of 1847. So I would suggest to you, if you have time, Google the map of 1847. And you will find, it's going to be kind of shocking. In fact, it was shocking to me, even though I knew the history. When you look at the map of the United States of 1847, you will find that a third of the United States was Mexico. A third of the United States was Mexico. And I know that we have criticized the Russians a lot because what they did with Crimea in the Ukraine, right? Well, this is what the United States did to Mexico. And our great president, Abraham Lincoln, said, yes, we stole Mexico fair and square. That's why they called him Honest Abe, okay? Because he told the truth. He told the truth there. And so when they tell people from Mexico, when they tell us, go back where you came from, we have to say, we are where we came from, okay? Because we didn't cross the border crossed us. We were here before the border. So, and then when we think of the refugees that are at the Mexican border, you know, the people that are in cages, women that are in cages, women that have lost their children. I was there with Carrie Kennedy speaking to a mother who had no idea what happened to her daughter. Her 7-year-old daughter was taken away from her. She had no idea where she was at. Another mother had her 5-year-old taken from her when he was asleep. That child went to sleep with his mother, the next day woke up and didn't know where he was at or where his mother was at. This kind of cruelty that has been, you know, taken upon these people is something that is so horrible. And when we think about the people that come from Latin America that are escaping terror, they're escaping poverty, and we think, well, why do they come here? Why do they come to the United States? Places that we go to as tourists, places like Guatemala, you know, Honduras, these places here. And I have one simple word to say, bananas. Bananas. How many bananas do we eat every single day? Does the money that we spend on bananas go to the people in Guatemala or El Salvador or Honduras? No. That money goes to our American banana companies like Chiquita Banana or Dole Banana or the other 50 banana companies. It does not go to the people that produce the products that we consume. And this is so wrong, because then we create the poverty with our American colonization, our economic colonization of these other countries. So we are actually, they are victims of capitalism, you might say, victims of profit. And somehow, you know, we have to change this. We are the richest country in the world, and we should be able to help the other countries, especially our neighbors to the south, instead of this constant exploitation. I remember just before the war that we had, the war in the Middle East, the war against Iraq, which we know was based on a lie to begin with. And somebody had a big sign, and it said, "How did our oil get under their sand?" How did our oil get under their sand? And when we think of all of the trillions of dollars at this point in time that we have spent on war, and what would have happened instead of spending all of that money on war if we actually use that money to help other countries develop their own economic systems and their own democratic system instead of constantly trying to control and take away their resources for the United States of America. So these are things, of course, that have to do with foreign policy, but these are things that we have to think about. What can we do to change this? We are the richest country in the world, and yet we hear in the debates that are going on right now, the presidential debates about having universal health care. Okay, why can't we have this? If you have countries in Europe, in Scandinavia, If you have little teeny little Cuba, this country in the Caribbean that we have an economic boycott, hey, they have free health care for every one of their citizens in that country. You know, they have a free education for every citizen in that country. Why cannot we in the United States of America do the same? Well, number one, we know that our wealth in our country is controlled by 1% of the wealthy families. The Walton family of Walmart, they actually have 50% of the wealth. These wealthy families have 50% of the wealth of the United States of America. And you have 10% of the wealthy corporations and the wealthy families that control 90% of the wealth of the United States of America. 90% of the wealth. Well, this is wrong. When you have the heads of some of these pharmaceutical companies, these healthcare companies, when you have the Fortune 500 company presidents, that their salaries are multi-millions of dollars, multi-millions of dollars. This is wrong. And I don't care how much money you have, you can only eat 3 meals a day. You can only wear 1 suit of clothes a day. So, you know, somehow we've got to change this mentality that profits are the way that we have to go. Just recently, I like to read the New York Times in the business section. I call it the crime report, okay? So you're reading about some of these companies like the Bayer, who just bought Monsanto. And they've been making this pesticide product, Roundup, for many, many years. Now they've got all of these lawsuits of people that have been, that have cancer and people that have died from this pesticide. But what are they saying? Well, they're going to settle all of those lawsuits, but that's okay. They're going to keep making Roundup anyway because they're still making a lot of money off of it. There was another report of a pharmaceutical company that actually makes a drug, a prescription, to keep children from, when they get cancer, to be able to help children when they have cancer, to deal with the cancer that they have. Well, they stopped making it because they were not making enough profit. So somehow we have to change this whole profit-driven mentality, because if we do that, and as Gandhi said, there are enough resources in the world to fill the need. Enough resources in the world to fill the need. We will never have enough resources to fill the greed. We will never have enough resources to fill the greed. So we have to think about, how do we change that? How do we change that? Well, the one thing that we do know is that it's up to all of us, that we have got to start attacking these issues of racism, you know. And when we think of racism, you know, then of course that is where slavery came from. And some of these, you might say, philosophies of slavery, it comes, of course, because, again, working people in the United States of America, you know, they have to fight to get a better wage. We have a big attack on labor unions, which are the representatives of working people. So if you do not have labor unions, you do not have a middle class. If you do not have a middle class, then you don't have a democracy. So these are things that are at work right now. And I often like to ask audiences, and maybe I'll ask this audience this also, how many of us know how we got the 8-hour day? Raise your hand. Anybody? Okay, a few people do know. Well, there was a big demonstration in Chicago on the 1st of May, May Day. This is what May Day is. But you know what happened to the people that, and this was at the turn of the last century, not this century, the last century. Do you know what happened to the labor leaders that fought for the 8-hour day? Something that all of us enjoy. We take it for granted. 8-hour days, weekends, okay? They were executed. They were hung. They were hung because they fought for the 8-hour day. This is something else that we do not include in our educational system. So people have no idea that labor unions got the 8-hour day, Social Security, workers' compensation, disability insurance, you know, safety standards, and public education. These are all things that labor unions fought for and died for. And even in the farmer movement, just to get toilets in the fields, just to get cold drinking water, to have the right to organize, to get unemployment insurance. In California, which, by the way, Ronald Reagan vetoed 3 times in a row after they passed the legislature, we had 5 farm workers that were killed trying to get those basic human rights, okay? So let's hope that we can start teaching people this history of our country, this history of justice, and try to go out there and take away the apathy that exists in so many people. And I can understand that. People are concerned about their jobs, they're concerned about their families, students are concerned about their schoolwork. But the one thing, and I think everybody in this audience knows this, that once we start working for social justice, once we start working to help other people, our personal problems kind of diminish. And you know what? They get resolved anyway, right? One way or the other, they're going to get resolved. So we have to go out there and organize other people to get involved so we can bring justice to our societies. And again, thinking of the person that started this lecture series, Margaret Parker, a woman, we definitely have to do more to get women and help women to take the leadership that they need. And Coretta Scott King said this. She said, "We will never have peace in the world until women take power," okay? So we have to do whatever that we can to make sure that women are engaged, and especially another thing we have to fight for as part of our educational system is for educational systems for our pre-K and kindergarten for children so that women and families can also get civically engaged. Because this is the way that we're going to change this, by everybody becoming engaged in their community. This is what my foundation does, the Dolores Huerta Foundation. When I left the United Farm Workers in 2002, I went back to grassroots organizing, because that's where Cesar and I both met, but we were grassroots organizers. You know, telling people in communities that they have power, that they can change the things that they need to change in their communities. And the one thing that they have to understand is that nobody is going to come in and do it for them. If they do not do it for themselves, things do not change, and that they have the power to change things, that they can actually do it, that they can, by organizing, by taking direct action, by confronting public officials, the way that Father Richard just described us a few minutes ago, that they can make those changes. And it's really interesting, because where we organize in the Central Valley of California, we have people who have never gone to high school, like Cesar, people who have never gone to college, but they are now serving on school boards, serving on recreation boards, city councils, and they know that they do have the power to make changes. And I'd like to give an example of one of our leaders. Her name is Leticia Prado. Speaks with very broken, she's an immigrant, speaks very broken English, but she got herself elected to the school board. And this is after she and her husband did a petition and passed a bond issue to build a brand new gymnasium at their middle school. They did this on their own. They got over 70% of the vote. So when she got elected to the school board, the principal was trying to get rid of the breakfast program for the farm worker children, because he said it was too much paperwork. Well, she got rid of the principal and kept the breakfast program, okay? So we know that leadership is there in every single community, and so we go in there, we have house meetings, we talk to the folks, and then we find out what their issues are, and then they have to make an action plan, and then they have to volunteer to do the work. And by doing the work, they grow their leadership. We have sued our high school district because of the large suspensions and expulsions of African American and Latino students. 2,600 students expelled in a year and a half. 2,600 African American and Latino students in a year and a half. I'm glad to say, after that lawsuit, from 2,600, it's down to 26. 26. In another area that we started organizing in, the suspension and expulsion of African American students, 81%, 8 out of 10 black kids were being expelled. And what they would do when a kid would do something wrong, they wouldn't call the parents, they would call the police. Take the child, even in elementary school, and right away they got a police record. We have more people in prison in the United States of America than any other country, including India or China. We have more people in prison in the state of California. Since 1965, starting from Bakersfield, California in the Central Valley to Sacramento, they have built 23 prisons and 1 university. And like Reverend Jesse Jackson says, it costs more money to put somebody in jail than it does to send them to Yale, okay? So these are our tax dollars at work. These are our tax dollars at work. So this whole criminal system that we have right now, and of course, African Americans call it the Second Reconstruction. What they did after slavery ended, when they started the Jim Crow and lynching African Americans, putting people in prison, this is what's happening right now. And so we look at the homeless situation, and we think, how many of the people that are homeless, especially people that are African American, how many of them were systems of our system of incarceration and discrimination, okay? So I know that all of you know many of the issues that I'm talking about. A lot of us know the work that we have to do, but of course the one thing that we cannot do, we cannot lose hope. We know that we have to keep working. We know that we have the power to actually change things. When we started, just an example of what we can do. When we started the Great Boycott for the farm workers, we couldn't win in the fields because they kept bringing in more and more strike breakers. So one of our attorneys said, hey, have you ever thought of doing a boycott? And we thought, okay, well, we'll try it. We hadn't thought of it. They had been doing the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama. So we said, okay. So some of our people went to the East Coast. So there was a bus of 40 farm workers and volunteers. Some of the people that went to farm workers, many couldn't speak very good English. One of our Filipino brothers was 80 years old, was on that bus. So 40 people left Delano, California, and they went to New York City to start the Great Boycott. Well, in a year and a half, the work of those 40 farm workers, because when they got to New York, they learned how to boycott and learned what they had to say, which is basically talking to people. And I'm sure many of you here in this room were part of the people that picketed stores and didn't buy grapes. 40 farm workers left. In a year and a half, 17 million Americans boycotted grapes. 17 million Americans boycotted grapes, okay? And the reason I want to give that example is when we think, that this task of ours is too big, this task of social justice is how can we possibly change everything? Just keep that in mind. These people that went out there, farm workers, many of them had never been out of their little small farm worker towns. Many who couldn't speak English, but went out there and got people to boycott grapes. So the work of social justice, we know, is not a difficult one. It just means that we have to talk, we have to organize, we have to speak to people, we have to make them understand. Because once people understand, then they will join the social justice movement. And they will get, especially folks like yourselves, get that spiritual leadership, the spiritual guidance that they need. And working all together, we can definitely make it happen. And, just before Senator Robert Kennedy was killed, by the way, I'm just going to advocate for the film called Dolores, which is about me, produced by Carlos Santana. But the reason I'm talking about that film, because I think it touches on some of the points that I mentioned today. And by the way, that evening when Senator Kennedy was killed, Cesar Chavez was actually staying at the Episcopal Church there in Los Angeles with Lydia Lopez. That's where he was at. And the reason that Cesar was not there at the moment that Senator Kennedy got shot is because his wife, Helen, made Cesar come back to get her because somehow they had locked the door and she couldn't get in to change, because we had been we had been door knocking, canvassing everywhere. So Cesar wasn't there at the moment that the senator was shot. But his last words before he was killed were these: we have obligations and responsibilities to our fellow citizens So if you can see the film Dolores, you can get it on PBS, on Independent Lens, and you will see Senator Kennedy uttering those words. We have responsibilities and obligations to our fellow citizens. And I think that all of us here know that. But we somehow have to spread that word to other people, that we have obligations and responsibilities to our fellow citizens, okay? And we could take that very seriously. Oh, and just one of the things that I forgot to mention is that the census is coming up. And I'm going to ask all of you to help us on the census also. You know, people think, oh, the census, that comes around every 10 years. You know, what's so special about that? Well, what's happening in our Latino community and communities of color, there is a lot of fear. And I'm not going to say people are scared. I'm going to say that they are terrified. They are terrified to be counted in the census. From the moment that President Trump came down the escalator and he attacked Mexicans as being rapists and criminals, the deportations, the people in cages at the border, people are afraid to participate in the census. So we've got to go out there and go into those hard-to-count communities, get people to organize neighborhood committees, get people to be able to go door to door to talk to their neighbors and tell them, please, you have to participate in the census, because what will happen if we do not get counted, we will lose millions and millions of dollars. Because for every person that gets counted, there are thousands of dollars, $2,000 for each individual. Over 10 years, that's $20,000 that will not come into our communities if people do not get counted. $20,000 over a 10-year period if people do not get counted. And what is that money, that $800 billion that the federal government distributes every year, what does that money go to? For schools, for housing, for health care. And the way that they decide how much money is going to go in each community is how many people live there. So if people do not get counted, the money is not going to come in to the people that need it the most, okay? So I'm just going to ask all of you to please, in your places where you live, in your neighborhoods, in your churches, please go out there, pass leaflets, get people to go in and canvass our organization. We are already knocking on doors, going door to door to inform people so that they can understand why it's important for them to get counted. It's like everything else. The only way we can make things happen is by all of us working together. We do have the power. And so to end this, I'm going to ask all of you the question. And I'm going to ask you the question, and I want you to answer, but I want you to shout it out very, very loud, okay? The question I'm going to ask you is, who's got the power? I want you to say, we've got the power. And when I say, what kind of power? I want you to say, people power. But I want you to shout it so loud that the neo-Nazis can hear us, okay? The homophobes, the misogynists, the sexual harassers, the climate change deniers, okay? The bigots, those people that look down on poor people and labor unions, okay? We want them to hear our voices. And then after we do the shouting, we're going to go back and we're going to do the work, okay? We're going to put some legs on the work that we need to do. So, are you ready? Okay, let's go. Very, very loud, okay? Who's got the power?
We have the power.
Okay, some people aren't sure. Okay, let's take a deep breath now and let's do it all together, but really, really loud. Who's got the power?
We have the power.
What kind of power?
People power.
Okay, so are we going to go out there? Are we going to work? Are we going to organize? Are we going to bring justice to our society? Okay, but let's do it. But we have to be unified, okay? We have to be together. So everybody, let's put our hands up. Let's do an organized clap, okay? And we'll say in Spanish, yes, we can. It's sí se puede.